This podcast is part of the Batman Universe Podcast Network, hosted by the BatmanUniverse.net. Check out everything related to Batman and the entire Bat family at the BatmanUniverse.net, including news and original content related to comics, movies, television, merchandise, video games, and more. Also, check out some of the other unique podcasts that TBU has to offer. Consider supporting this podcast by becoming a patron on Patreon. Even $1 can go a long way in supporting this content that you enjoy. Look for a link over at the BatmanUniverse.net to offer your support now. And now, on with the show.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Tim, former GameStop employee. This is episode 198. My name is Tim, and joining me, as always, is Dane. What's up, Dane?
A whole lot of nothing, I guess you could say. Being laid off and everything. Yeah, so I guess a whole lot of nothing. You know, I will say, there is one thing that I really, really missed that I didn't expect that I was going to miss that much when this coronavirus thing started. You know what that is, Tim?
What is it?
Baseball.
Oh,
yeah. Miss baseball.
I know, it feels weird that we're in the middle of April now and there's been no games played. And, I mean, just this past week they had Jackie Robinson Day, and it felt so weird having the celebration of that day and what Jackie Robinson did and what he means for the sport, the country, and all that. But yet no baseball games were being played, and because usually when they celebrate Jackie Robinson Day, every player is wearing his number 42 on their jersey. It sucked that that wasn't the case this year. So yeah, I'm with you. It's gonna feel more strange to start missing it more as the months go by, because I don't know, I'm kind of preparing myself for no baseball at all this year, which is gonna suck, but I know it's a possibility now with everything that's going on. So we'll see. But if we are going to get any baseball this year, it's going to be drastically different. That's for sure.
Yeah, I wonder how they're going to do it. I mean, are they going to... Okay, so the season is now only 72 games or whatever, you know, whenever baseball comes back. Or are all the previous wins... I mean, are all the previous games going to be considered wins?
No, they can't. I don't think they can do that. They just have to. It has to be a shortened season.
Yeah, I guess.
And I guess it has to come to a point where how short is too short? Where like if they have a very short season with it's only a month or two, and they go straight to the postseason, would any team or any fan really look at that championship?
Yeah,
that's as true. Serious as they would any other one because how short it was. So
going to be an asterisk next to that World Series win, like the Astros. I don't know.
I know, exactly. And that's another thing. The Astros are getting the break of a lifetime with this now. No one's going to care about them by the time we get... I'm hoping that's not the case. I know I'll still have that they're cheating for 2017 fresh in my mind whenever baseball starts again. But I'm wondering when to fully... if let's say it doesn't come back till 2021, are they still going to get as booed and heckled as much as they would have this year and really feel it for the cheating that they did?
I hope they do.
Same here.
At least you're not in the AL West, Tim. Imagine being stuck in the same division as them.
Just got to use that as motivation to beat them.
Yeah, I guess so. But yeah, that's one thing I do miss is it's not so much going out or going to restaurants. It's like, man, I wish I could just watch baseball right now. I mean, I know the MLB TV is free right now, and you can watch older games, but
yeah, but it's
I don't
still
know.
not quite the same.
Yeah, it's not the same thing, and I just miss baseball out of everything.
Yeah, I feel you. Hopefully we'll get something. I don't know what, but something
Yeah,
this year. But we shall wait and see. But
start at the playoffs.
that would really diminish the championship, I
Like like
think.
like every team gets into the playoffs, right? And then you just eliminate them, one game elimination games until
Everything's a wild card game. Huh?
yeah. That's one way to do it. Or
That's true.
once you get down to four teams, you can play a ALCS or a NLCS, right?
Yeah, playoffs are always considered a crapshoot before, but they'll especially be one if they do it that way. It's going straight into it.
Yeah, I guess the A's will be out really quick.
That's the thing. A really bad team can have
Yeah,
them
I know.
start off hot and go on a winning streak and win a World Series title.
Yeah, I know. You imagine like the was a bad team last the Orioles or
Yeah.
something, Rays or
Well, the
the
Rays are actually pretty
Reds.
good.
Oh yeah, the Rays are good. The Reds. Sonny Gray finally gets a ring.
Oh man, yeah. Let's not go down that road. But yeah. Well, one thing we can always count on though to pass the time is Dark Knight Rises. Watching it a minute by minute every 2 weeks. I mean, a minute every 2 weeks makes it go by quick, right? Nothing else.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess we have something to look forward to every
Yeah. Just 1 minute out of these 2 weeks.
1 minute at a time.
But speaking of that 1 minute, it's going to be the 2 hour and 26 minute, or when I say hours, not a minute, but I should say the 146 minute and the 2 hour and 26 mark on the movie. So as always, get your VHS player, your DVD player, your Betamax, your Laserdisc, your Blu-ray, your HD DVD, your Netflix physical media disc, your Blockbuster membership card, and as always, the greatest of them all, the VHS to DVD recorded copy, the only way to watch movies. So if you got all those, I feel sorry for you because you got still hanging on to all those dead media formats. But it just means you have plenty of options. But
Yeah, I know. Like, can you imagine if like you're a big investor and you're like, okay, this Laserdisc thing is going to be the next big media type. It's the thing of the future.
It's a
So
revolution.
we're gonna put all of our money into Laserdisc and HD DVD, and then it promptly goes bust
Yeah.
like in no time.
Yeah, not even a few months, really. Well, I think Laserdisc maybe had a few good years. I'm not sure
It
how
yeah
many.
it,
A
it, it
couple.
had years. It had years, Tim, but
Yeah,
not
the
not over
HD
5.
HD DVD didn't have years. It had months.
Yeah, I mean, I remember seeing one HD DVD player, and then I
And
never saw another one.
do you remember the Xbox 360 came out with a attachment HD DVD player that you would plug into your system?
What? Really?
Yeah, because Microsoft was all on board on HD DVD and Sony was Blu-ray, and so that was kind of the format wars going on back then, like around 2006. And we all know what won
Yeah.
out, but a big reason it was probably because the PS3 had the built-in Blu-ray and the 360
Yeah.
had to buy that attachment separately, which wasn't that great.
Yeah, that's true. Um, so if I remember correctly, you could still put a DVD into the Xbox 360, right?
Yes.
Yeah. But the Sony, the PlayStation 3 was only Blu-ray.
Yeah. Well, it could play DVD and Blu-ray, but
Oh,
it was the next big step, obviously. So,
yeah.
which is so
Oh,
weird now that Sony did the opposite for the PS4, where it can't play 4K movies
yeah.
when it can play games. But because they were the ones, I mean, Matt, think back to the PS2. how it was such a big deal that you were getting a DVD player with your video game system. And I think that was a big reason why it was so successful, especially in the early days of the system. And again, the PS3 Blu-ray, but
yeah, because I remember like that was what sold my parents on it.
mm-hmm.
You know, like I mean, obviously I didn't have what $300 back when I was what 11.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that was the big selling point where I was like, they saw that there was a DVD player in it, and they could play DVDs on it, and that's how I got my PlayStation 2.
Nice. That was a big deal. We're coming up on 20 years on that. I mean, it's already 20 years for the Japan release, but over here in America, it came out in October, and man, that was crazy, or a huge deal in the gaming world. But
October of 2002, right?
No, 2000.
2000, right?
Yeah. I remember that day well because when the Yankees won their championship that same day, beating the Mets in the Subway Series.
Was that a sweep? That was a sweep, right?
No, the Mets won one game. I think they won game 3. But
I see.
It was almost as good as a sweep, but not quite.
It was probably too late by game 3.
Yeah. They gave them a token win. They could win one game at Shea Stadium, and that's fine. They let them have that.
Yeah, which is what the Yankees thought when they played the Red Sox in 2004.
Yeah, you had to bring that up, didn't you?
Oh, that was 3 games to none, right? And then they came back. They won 4 straight.
Uh-huh.
And then what happened, Tim? Oh yeah, right. They won the World Series.
See, I don't know if I could change any series. I don't know which one I would change first. That series or the Diamondbacks World Series.
Yeah, right. That's the you know what? One World Series I would change is the Yankees Braves one. I wanted the Braves to win that World Series so real bad.
96 one? Or
I think
99?
so.
Okay. Because 96 was the first time that they played each other.
Might have been 99.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Yankees swept the Braves that year too.
Yeah, was that a... Yeah, because the next big one was the Subway Series.
Yeah.
The Mets and the Yankees. And I wanted the Mets to win, of course.
Of course.
The Yankees Red Sox one, I didn't really care about, to be honest. I mean, I know that was a big historic moment, but you know, I didn't really care about the ALCS. I didn't care about the World Series either.
I definitely didn't care about the World Series. Well, I kind of did because I didn't want the Red Sox to win, but to keep the curse alive, but that didn't happen. So I really don't care about that 04 season in general.
Yeah. Even some of the Giants ones I didn't really care for. I was like, okay, good.
Yeah, that 2014 one was a good series against the Royals, though.
I'm trying to remember that one.
That was when Bumgarner was just unbelievable when he came in relief in Game 7. That was a great Game 7.
Yeah, you see, I don't even remember it.
Well, maybe it's because the wild card game was so painful for you that year, and you didn't want to remember anything else.
And some of the Cardinals ones too. Didn't they go to was it three World Series?
Yeah, 04, 06 they won it, and then 2011 they won it.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of NLCSs, but I think those were the only World Series that they made it into. Oh, they were in 13 also, but the Red Sox beat them again.
Oh, right. Yeah, so I don't know. It's been a while since I cared about a World Series. I guess you could say. Well, the Astros Dodgers one, I cared about, or I followed.
You gotta follow all of them, but I guess it's just how good they are what makes you care and remember them later on down the line once several seasons pass. But I think everyone's going to care about that 2017 win now, though, because of the cheating.
Yeah, everybody's going to remember that one. It's too bad nobody will remember the A's winning a World Series.
Come on, I still remember 1989, right?
That was 30 years ago, Tim. Almost 30 years ago. So.
And I think we mentioned this before. Oakland, that's not even the most memorable aspect of that World Series. It's the earthquake that happened in there, which kind of took away from their spoils of glory, I guess.
Yeah, that's funny. They finally won a World Series and they can't celebrate it. Because there's a big earthquake and there's the recovery and everything.
Yeah, well, we're reliving too many painful baseball memories right now. So.
I know. Maybe we should do the Dark Knight Rises.
Yeah, let's get our mind off of blown big leads and championships you couldn't celebrate. Okay, so I will give the countdown in 3, 2, 1, go. Well, I imagine every Gotham sporting event would have been canceled and postponed after the events that are taking place right now.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
this is pretty much. Yeah, this is pretty much done.
Yeah,
everything is done.
As you see missiles chasing the bat and blowing into buildings, and
yeah.
Well, we already saw what happened to the Gotham Knights
stadium.
Football stadium. So. Nice, such a cool action sequence with the bat.
Yeah, I was about to say, you know what? This holds up really, really well.
Yeah. Sometimes it doesn't. When you think about the movie, this aspect of it doesn't get talked about, at least from my experience anyway.
Yeah.
But it is a really good one. I don't know. Chris Nolan, the guy said he wanted to up the scale as far as this action beats in this one, and he definitely did with this. And Batman just killed someone else right there, it looks like. But we'll have to see what happens next. Is Talia going to survive?
I don't know, Tim.
That onslaught.
But you know, one thing I do want to say is, I mean, he just died, but that truck driver is a really, really good truck driver.
Yeah. He saw what he had to put up with. I mean, not just the bat, but the missiles coming out from the tumbler from his own men there too. So
he's actually a really good truck driver. I don't know if you have to go to additional schooling for that, or you just need your standard CDL.
It's a separate form from the League of Shadows that they provide for their members.
Yeah, I guess so. Truck driving, what is it? It's training.
Yeah, truck driving 101, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that does it for our Dark Knight Rises minute by minute commentary, which can lead us into our feature topic, which is going to be all about video games on this one. Got me thinking how we're pretty much close to the end of this console generation with the Xbox One, the PS4, and we're going to be moving to a new one sometime later this year. I don't know if new systems are going to be delayed due to everything that's going on with the coronavirus, but this supposedly still scheduled to launch this fall, the PS5 and the Xbox Series X. So we're still going to get some games coming out, but I think it's time to think about not only this generation what our favorite games are, but from each generation of consoles that we were alive to play. So this one is going to be our favorite game from each console generation, which wasn't easy to decide, and got plenty of honorable mentions probably that I'll talk about too. But another reason which maybe want to prompt this discussion for our feature topic is because, as I was talking about this being the end of this console generation, and I think one of the big games that will be remembered for it, at least for me, that I'm loving the heck out of, is Final Fantasy VII Remake that came out last week. So before we actually get into our list, I got to ask you about that game, Dane, because I know you got it. I've been playing it. So how have you been enjoying Final Fantasy VII Remake?
I hated it, Tim. I hated everything about it.
You quit already, right? You're done.
I really, really like it. It's not a remake. It doesn't feel like a remake to me in the sense that they've changed things. I mean, like the essence is still there.
Yeah.
But it's I don't know how to put it into words without contradicting myself. You know, it's like I said it's not a remake, but it seems like it's its own separate thing. But they're just retelling the same Final Fantasy VII story that we played for however long, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're just fleshing it out more. But it feels like a completely separate thing. And What really surprised me, what really, really, really surprised me was how they got the aesthetic right.
Yeah,
When
dude.
you when you go to the slums for the first time,
mm,
I was like, yeah, this is exactly how I pictured it when I played it when I played Final Fantasy VII when it came out. This is exactly what it looks like. This is exactly what it feels like. They absolutely nailed it. And same thing goes with all of the Mako reactors, the church especially.
yeah.
They it's a exact copy except they made it look better. I it's it's near perfect, I'd say.
Oh, I would agree with you 100%. And you nailed it. Just it's perfection in how you think back to Final Fantasy VII, the original, playing it for the first time and blowing you away back when it first came out. And then it's so good you play it several other times later on. And when you're playing it, especially later on in console generations where you're seeing the improvements in graphics and what games can be now, and you just think to yourself, man, imagine if they would make Final Fantasy VII now, what the graphics would be like, the details on the levels and the environments. And this game is a dream come true on that front. It, like you said, it's exactly what you would hope for and imagine when playing the original game, and just thinking about the possibilities of playing it with modern game technology and graphics and gameplay mechanics. It's just delivering on all fronts. I cannot be more pleased with it. Just the opening section was just doing the bombing mission again, playing it like you would play a modern game with those graphics, the voice acting now, different combat, but the new combat is so much fun. And I love turn-based RPGs. I would have been totally happy if it was just a standard remake where it's just a graphical upgrade and some voice acting and cutscenes and all that stuff that was being upgraded, but the gameplay was exactly the same. I would have been okay with that. But the improvements they made to it to make it more action and combat based, it's a heck of a lot of fun while still keeping some of those turn-based mechanics in there too. It's just so balanced perfectly, in my opinion. And just playing these iconic moments again with like never before, it's just blowing me away every time I start playing it. It's just incredible. And just like you said, expanding on this experience and the story that we know about Final Fantasy VII originally, just adding more to it, which is so much fun. And the way it just, for instance, the moment where after you do the bombing mission and you're showing the aftermath of how Midgar and just the residential areas affected by that, you just see all the people out in the streets, just in their homes, suffering because of what happened and wondering what they're going to do. Just the immersiveness that it creates, and like I said, when you get to the slums and expanding on that and just seeing more of it, it just makes me so anxious to see what's coming next as we move further along in the story. It's just, everything about it is just blowing me away. I cannot be happier with it, and I want to take my sweet time with it, but yet it's so fun. I find myself spending hours in it. Right now, about 11 hours into it, I just met up with Aerith, and we were just completed the church sequence, and we're at her house right now. So that's where I'm at. Not sure how much
Okay.
further you are than me, Dane.
We're almost at the exact same place.
Okay.
After you meet Aerith, now I guess we have to call her Aerith
Yeah,
now
because
because
I'm
she has
still
a.
I'm
Go
still
ahead.
used to calling it Eris, but
Yeah.
the original Japanese release, so it's always Eris, and I'm not sure why they changed it to Eris in the American release, but from every other official Final Fantasy VII release, Japan or American otherwise, it's always been Eris now, but to me, she'll
Yeah.
always be Eris.
I think it was a translation problem.
Probably.
Yeah. But yeah, we're almost exactly at the same point. I You said you're at her house now?
Yeah. Mm.
Okay. See, I'm trying to remember now. Okay, we left the church. We went down into the slums. We fought the guys. By the way, I think I have the most fun playing as Aerith.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, her skill set or whatever you call it is the best so far. Next to Barrett's, I really like Barrett. Um, Tifa and Cloud are just kind of basic. I mean, it's just like the basic thing, you know. But I really like Barrett and Aerith especially. Um, but yeah, I'm going through that. I don't know what you call it, trash heap or whatever.
Yeah.
You know where you
The
got to move that
junkyard
big.
type area. Yeah.
Yeah, like you got to move that big. You know what do you call it? The shipping container, and you got to go
Mm.
around just to unlock the door. Yeah, I'm at that part.
Yep. I'm just a little bit ahead of you. So you'll be around that very soon. And I also like how it's expanding to some of the side characters from the game, like Jesse, Biggs, and Wedge, how they pretty much
Yeah,
had their own mission that you had to do, which was nowhere near what was in the original Final Fantasy VII game. But it's just, enhancing their characters and their interactions with Cloud. And if you play the original Final Fantasy VII game, you know what happens later on. And I think it's going to make that much more impactful, spending more time with these characters that you're really caring about. So there's stuff like that too, and how it's adding to some characters that didn't have the chance to get expanded upon in the original game. So that's another great aspect about it that I'm loving as well.
yeah, that's one thing I wanted to ask you because I don't know how many times playing this game I was like, I don't remember that,
Yeah.
or like I thought this happens. I thought this happens later, like meeting Eris for the first time. I mean, having her join your party in the church. I thought that happened before you. I thought that happened earlier when you guys go. Everybody goes back to the bar.
Okay. Yeah,
Or am I?
yeah, so far everything that stuff that's they're retelling from the main game is happening the same, but certain added stuff is just mixed in between it. So I don't think the original sequences are happening out of order. They're still happening the way they
Yeah,
were, but just stuff's being added and sprinkled in between
yeah,
those moments
that's
as well.
yeah. Especially like Wedge and Jesse, and I remember being like, I don't remember them talking this much.
Oh, that
Like,
definitely wasn't the case. Yeah.
yeah, I just remember them being there, and then they weren't there, and then you know,
I know, but it's great additions to it though. So
yeah.
much the first motorcycle chase that you had with them was really fun too, because
Oh
we all
yeah.
know that happens later on in the game, but to get another sequence like that and pretty early on was really fun too.
The spinning strike on the motorcycle.
Yeah.
I, I
you
really
get
like
that
doing that.
you get that new character too. I forget his name, but that cocky motorcycle soldier who you fight along the way in that mission. I mean, it was fun beating him up and shutting him up as well, because he has a big cocky mouth that it just annoys you. So it's always, I'm sure that
Yeah,
guy will show up again, and I'm sure it'll be just as fun to beat him as it was in that first mission.
you fight him twice, right?
Once on the
Once.
motorcycle, and then just one sword to sword combat.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's what I thought. The tank buster. That was a really hard fight. Up to that point, I was like, man, this game is kind of easy. I mean, did I put this on easy? Um, but then that fight with like the three phases. The first phase,
Mm,
you're fighting it, and then the second phase, the arm thing.
yeah, that was the
Third
toughest part
phase
about for me was with his
with the
arms
arms.
disconnected.
Yeah, yeah, me too. Like, I couldn't figure out how to like who should attack the arms, or like should I attack the arms? And
Mm,
then you know when he goes up in the air and then he sends out his drones and everything. Yeah,
yeah.
that took me a little while, Tim.
I actually didn't die on that, but it was a good challenging fight. It wasn't like a walk in the park either, though. But I guess I chose because before that you could kind of weaken it a little bit. You get these key cards as you're making your way through the Shinra
Right, right.
reactor, and you get to choose like deactivate certain aspects of it. So I chose to deactivate all of his big bombs that he had. So maybe that helped not getting hit by those. So, but it was a fun, challenging boss, though.
Yeah, I can't remember which one I deactivated. Wasn't there one like fast movement or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I deactivated that, and then the rest just bombs.
Okay.
Yeah,
But yeah, so
but
they
yeah,
kept saying any little bit that helps defeating this boss, we got to take advantage of it. So I kind of knew it was going to be something that was probably the most challenging boss so far in the game, but it was still fun. And thank goodness I had a during the arm where its arms separated during that sequence, I had the summon ready to go. So if it came in handy, taking out those arms, with surviving that moment.
Yeah, yeah. I did the exact same thing. Um, I just saw Ifrit, and then I was like, oh, okay, I'm gonna send out Ifrit,
Yeah.
and then yeah, he helped me with the arms, and then he goes up in the air, and then I also had kind of a hard time with I forget, is it Reno
Oh, okay.
in the
Yeah.
church?
Right after.
Yeah, yeah, in the church. I also had kind of a hard time with his dashing and stuff, and
Yeah.
those drones with the electricity going
Yeah.
across.
Those EMP
Yeah,
devices.
yeah,
Your limit break came in handy on that fight.
yeah.
That's kind of what I had. I got to use my limit break twice in that fight, and that definitely helped take his health
Oh,
down
really?
a significant portion. Yeah.
Oh, you're lucky. I only had it once at the end, the end of the fight.
The end. It's
Yeah,
like so. Yeah, Final Fantasy VII Remake has been everything I was hoping it would be, and more. The worst part about it is turning it off, and when
yeah.
you're done with it. But again, I
Or
don't want to beat
beating
it
it.
too quick.
Yeah, beating it, and then you have to wait 5 years for the next
I
one.
know. I don't want to think about that. I just know it's going to take forever if this one is any indication.
Yeah.
So
Um, it's almost a perfect 5 for me.
yeah, I mean, I don't see what can happen later on that could really take it down for
Yeah,
me at all. Just I'm loving everything. Plus, you kind of know what's going to happen anyway, knowing playing the first or the original game, but there are going to be some added stuff to it, which is going to be cool. So yeah, I don't see what could possibly hinder my enjoyment from it moving forward. I'm just the more I play it, the more I love it.
I don't know. I kind of have a sneaking suspicion that they're gonna change something big. I just don't know what it is.
Yeah,
You know?
you might be right. I mean,
Yeah,
obviously, just having Sephiroth be more involved in the beginning in this one's a kind of a big change, but it still makes sense that this would be something that Cloud would be experiencing. So, but yeah, I don't know if it's going to
yeah.
be a huge, significant change later on, but so you might not be wrong about that, but we shall see.
Or even Zack too. I don't remember this much Zack in the beginning of the game, but I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't I don't remember him that often,
No,
like
not until
flashback
later.
wise.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. You don't even see him until like the second or third disc, right? The third disc, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, has he? Because I'm trying to remember. I don't remember seeing him pop up yet in this one, like in a flashback or not. Is it just because it's mainly just
Yeah,
Cloud and Sephiroth? But
yeah. When Cloud is talking to himself, I thought that was.
see, I thought it was Zack at first too, but it ended up just being Cloud to Cloud. Maybe it'll eventually we'll
Hmm,
get another kind of
yeah,
sequence like that, and Cloud thinks he's talking to himself, but it gets revealed that it is Zack.
yeah, right.
So that's possible too.
Or maybe it's because I know or we know
Yeah,
who that is, right?
and plus in the Advent Children movie, there was a lot of moments like that where he's surrounded nothing by white backgrounds and he's talking to Zack and Harris there. So maybe it was kind of harkening back to that, which made you think that it was Zack.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I just don't remember knowing anything about Zack until later on, way later on. But
Do you ever have a PSP?
no, no, I never
Because
owned one. No.
there came out a great Final Fantasy VII game there called Crisis Core, which pretty much it's all about Zack's story, and you get to play as Zack, and
Oh,
it's
really?
really, really good. Part of me wishes that they would make that a console version somehow, just upgrade it a little bit, kind of like how they did the Kingdom Hearts PSP version for that collection. Just do that for that game because it's the story on it's fantastic, and it's just great to get that more background to Zack and Cloud's relationship too. But it's really, really good. If anything, maybe you should just look up the cutscenes on YouTube and experience that
Yeah,
way.
yeah. Maybe I'll watch what do they call it? Let's play?
It's called
Yeah.
a Crisis Core.
No, no.
Oh,
The version of the YouTube video of Let's Play, is that what they call it, or walkthrough?
oh, okay. Yeah, there's walkthroughs of
Yeah,
it. I'm sure. There's
yeah.
probably some that just have a collection of cutscenes
Oh
where you
yeah,
don't have to see the playthrough. But I'll just say you'll get emotional at the end because you know what happens, but the
really?
way it details it, yeah,
Yeah.
it hit
Okay.
you.
I also like how you can see the materia in Cloud Sword,
Yeah,
the little gems.
Yeah, but their weapons aren't even some of the armor that they have on. It's just
Yeah,
really cool details like that just helps sells it.
Where is Eris's one though?
I haven't gotten a good look at her staff that she's using yet, so I don't know. Might have to try to look at that as we move on and do some errands, I guess, is my next mission was going to be. But
Yeah, finding cats.
Hey, I'm never going to complain about missions like that involve cats. So yeah, Final Fantasy VII Remake, awesome. Play it. If you never experienced Final Fantasy VII before, I think you'll love it. And for those who have played Final Fantasy VII and love that game, this is going to be exactly what you're hoping for. I just think they did a great job with it. So will this be the definitive game for this console generation? I don't know. It's going to be up there, but
what would be now?
Well, we'll get to that.
Yeah.
But before, I'll have to go all the way back to the very first systems that we played. And I'm not sure if this is going to be your first, Dane, because I know I'm a little older than you, but I'm going to start with the NES era.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Amiga. The Atari.
The ColecoVision or what was it? Something like that, yeah. I'm not that old. So yeah, the Nintendo was my very first system, and this was kind of hard because so many franchises that I love started here, and so many were my first introduction to classic games and gameplay styles. I mean, just think about obviously the first Mario Brothers, the first Legend of Zelda. You got Metroid on there. Games like Gradius, I always played as a space shooter, and probably a bunch of classic games I've never even played before that are on there. But also, Final Fantasy got its start there, and even great licensed games are on there, like the original Batman and the Turtles games. The first Turtles game was good, but not great. But the second one that adapted the arcade game, fantastic at the time. They even added some levels on there. So obviously, the Nintendo is a classic system that you can't go wrong choosing multiple games on here. But I made it a strict rule where I have to pick one for each era. So the one I'm going to go with is Super Mario Brothers 3 as my favorite game from that console generation, because to me it was the pinnacle of what the Nintendo system was about. First being introduced to the gameplay styles of Mario in the first Super Mario Brothers, but then Super Mario Brothers 3 I think perfected that. Adding the way you select level each world, you on this world map, you pick a level, the way you get these different power-ups within those worlds, like the leaf where it turns that gives you the raccoon tail and ears that allows you to fly. You get a frog costume that helps you swim, a fox costume that you get, which turns into a statue that protects yourself. All these different gameplay mechanics that just took the Mario formula up to another level. And I just remember being blown away by that as a little kid, having played the original Mario Brothers and Super Mario Brothers 2 being something totally different. But when 3 came out, and I don't know if you remember this, Dane, did you ever see the movie The Wizard with Fred Savage?
No, I haven't.
It's technically a video game based movie, but that's where Super Mario Brothers 3 kind of made its debut, and the world got to see it for the first time in that movie, because they enter a video game competition and they throw on this huge surprise. Like, you have to play a game you never played before, Super Mario Brothers 3. And that's my first exposure to that game, just seeing how cool it could be. And then finally getting my hands on it, experiencing all those cool new gameplay mechanics is just so much fun. The way, like I said, it broke down each level into a world map, and there's these different short mini games that I always found fun that gave you some power-ups. And then how at the end of each level, the boss fight would be the Koopa Kids, their first introduction. You go on these different airships to make your way there and then fight each Koopa Kid who had this unique abilities and unique look that I always loved. And obviously they lasted throughout the Mario series as well. So a lot of cool stuff was introduced in Super Mario Brothers 3. And knowing how kind of the very first one is what you think about when you think about the Nintendo Entertainment System and how that started it all, but I think Super Mario Brothers 3 perfected it, and I just had so many fun times playing that game. So that's going to be my favorite game from the NES era. It was going to be that or The Legend of Zelda, which obviously was revolutionary, but I'll be getting to that series a little later. So, but for this one, I think I have to give it to Super Mario Brothers 3, just for how perfect it was.
Yeah, for me, the first console I owned was the NES, the original NES. But I had bought it right as, or I think the Super NES had been out for like a year. So what is that, 95?
Oh, the Super Nintendo actually came out around 91, I believe. 90 or 91.
Really?
Yeah, so you got this NES way late if you got it in 95.
Hold on, let me see. Yeah, okay, so yeah, I guess it had been out for a while, and uh, of course, the first and only game that I owned for it was the original Mario Brothers and the Duck Hunt, right?
Yeah,
The Duck
such a
Hunt
great
game.
combo. Yeah.
Of course, a game with the orange gun. I remember buying the whole set from a consignment store. I don't know if you remember those, Tim.
I don't think I've ever been to one actually.
Yeah, there was like a consignment store that opened up by my house, by my parents' house. And I remember going and buying it, and then as soon as I bought it, the store closed down.
So you got
And
this in time.
yeah, and I didn't know where else to buy video games. There wasn't really a store. What became GameStop was called Software, etc.
Yeah, I remember that store.
Right?
Yep.
But they only sold computer games and computer software.
Ah.
They didn't sell video games at the time. They eventually got video games, but they only sold like computer hardware, computer software, and computer games. So I didn't know where to buy games until one day I I went to a garage sale with my grandpa. Like my grandpa used to love to go to all of these garage sales. Like he would plan them all out on the old, book map,
The
right?
Thomas Guide.
Yeah. And we would go. And then I remember one time I found one game. Do you know what that game was, Tim? You probably have not played it.
Mm, there's so many games to choose from. I don't know. If I haven't played it, I don't know. I'll take a guess. The original Metal Gear.
No.
Okay.
Far from it. It was the Jaws NES game.
Oh, dude, I had that game. I owned it too.
Yeah. Yeah. So I had pretty much just three games for that system. The Mario Brothers, the Duck Hunt, and then the Jaws NES game. And I remember playing all three of those religiously, back to back to back,
Mm.
all day, every day. Especially during like the summer vacation where, you you're not going outside. I mean, come on. We're
Not when you got a Nintendo system.
yeah, not when you have a Nintendo. And I remember just playing those three games endlessly. So yeah, that's my three games, I guess you would say.
So out of the three, you got to pick one. Which was your favorite?
Probably the Mario Brothers,
Yeah.
the original Mario Brothers. Yeah.
But that Jaws game, I think it's kind of has a bad reputation, but I remember having fun with it. I never did beat it though because it could have never, I guess, stick the harpoon into the shark once you actually face him. But I remember always had fun driving your boat around the map, going diving underwater, fighting these sea creatures, and occasionally you'd see the shark. But I don't know.
Yeah.
If I go back to play it now, I probably wouldn't think the same. But I remember
Yeah, you
having fun
probably
with it back in the day.
yeah, and that's exactly why I picked Mario is because I'm sure you can go back and play Mario, right? Or Super Mario or Mario 3, and you could still have fun with it, right?
Yeah, definitely. It stood the test of times, I could
Yeah,
safely
yeah.
say. All right, so two Mario games for the NES era, which I think is fitting because that's what started it all. But now we're going to move on to the Super NES/Sega Genesis era, which is my personal favorite era of video games. So that's why I really dived in hardcore to the gaming. I mean,
Yeah.
you could say that for the Nintendo too, but for the Super Nintendo, that's I think has the best library of games with so many different genres. It introduced me to different genres of gaming, and the graphics at the time to being so unlike anything compared to the Nintendo, but so many great stuff from the Super Nintendo and the Genesis. I was fortunate enough to have both, but
Rich kid.
Well, thanks to garage sales, good report cards, and allowances saved up,
Sure.
that's what helped me get it. Actually,
Can,
I got
can
the Super Nintendo kind of later though. I had
yeah,
a
yeah.
Genesis
So did
before the
I.
Nintendo. But I had friends and family, like my cousin who lived in the house back of us. She got a Super Nintendo, and we go over there all the time and play it, or she'd bring it over. Then a friend of ours who we got to know during that time brought his Super Nintendo over every week, so got to play it a lot, despite not owning one for a few years.
Yeah, same thing with me. I got it later. It had already been out. In fact, I think the PlayStation had already come out
Okay,
when
I
when
didn't
I
get it
had
quite
my
that late, but
when I had my Super NES. But can I go first on
oh,
picking
go for it.
my favorite game because it'll be quick, and it might be one of your favorite games. The one game that I remember playing like uh, every single day, not only by myself with friends and stuff. Street Fighter 2.
Dude, man, yeah, that's up there for me. I can't even count how many hours I've spent playing that on the Super Nintendo with friends. Yep.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, you couldn't play as M. Bison or Vega, right?
Nope, not in the very first one. It was just the 8 characters, the
Yeah,
original
yeah,
fighters. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Because
But
I remember wanting to. Oh,
do
go
you
ahead.
remember the machine Game Genie that allowed you to enter cheat codes and everything? It was because there was a Game Genie first, and the kind of Game Shark was the big one during like the PS2 era. But
I remember it for. Wasn't there one for Game Boy?
there might have been, I can't remember, but I know the Game Genie was first on the Nintendo, and then they made another one for the Super Nintendo, and it wasn't good for your games because you were kind of
Yeah,
messing up with the programming on there. Because there was a, I remember a friend of mine came with, guys, we can be the boss fighters in Street Fighter, like M. Bison, Vega, and Balrog, and Sagat. And he entered it, and it's like I forget exactly what you do, but you pick a character, and they're all pixelated, where you can't actually see them. You see their character models, but they're really dark coloring. They're pixelated. Like you can kind of make out their shape, knowing like you're playing M. Bison. I can't even remember if you can actually do their moves or not, but it was some go, oh, this isn't quite the same. But better turn this off because you're kind of might be ruining the game. And because there was another kid who would come over and play with us who couldn't beat us unless he had the Game Genie cheat codes on there that you could do a move with only hitting one button, that type of stuff. So the only way he would stand a chance and would get mad when we turned off. But I remember that being a big deal, like you said, as far as not being able to play the boss fighters and having the somewhat opportunity to was a big deal for me. I remember, but still had to wait a little bit longer until the Turbo Edition came out.
yeah. Am am I making this up again? Like with Final Fantasy VII, it's like, am I making this up or am I misremembering? I remember playing Star Fox on the Super NES. Wasn't there a Star Fox game on
Yeah,
there?
that's where the first game debuted on was the Super
Right, right,
Nintendo.
right,
Yep.
right. Yeah, I remember playing. I remember playing that game because I remember you couldn't you didn't die immediately if you hit a building or something.
No, yeah.
Like
You had
like
a
you,
life bar, yeah.
yeah, you had a shield or you had shield and then you had life, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, so I'm not misremembering. Yeah, I remember playing Star Fox on there and SimCity. SimCity, I remember
Oh, really?
playing SimCity.
I remember seeing the box for SimCity on the Super Nintendo, but I never played it. Never
Yeah,
got into the like simulation type games.
yeah. Also, another fighting game, Mortal Kombat. I think that had its debut on the Super NES too.
I remember that was a big deal because the Super Nintendo was the edited version, or the Sega Genesis had with all the fatalities and the blood.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
But yeah,
man.
that's
So
it for me.
those Street Fighter is your pick, right?
Street Fighter 2.
And that was definitely high on my list. And man, the Super Nintendo was one of those really hard ones because there's so many great games. Street Fighter is up there. Star Fox was a big deal. I love that game. And you think about the classic Nintendo franchises that pretty much had games that are still considered masterpieces today debut on. There's Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past, which is regarded as still one of the best in the series. Super Mario World 1 and 2, and think about Donkey Kong Country. Those games were fun, and the graphics on those being so so unreal at the time. I remember those 3D polygon models that it used. So many good stuff, and the Super Nintendo was known for great RPGs as well. Final Fantasy games that were on there, and can't forget about the Sega Genesis, the Sonic the Hedgehog debuting in this era too. What a revolutionary game that was! And I only had 4 Genesis games, but Sonic games. I remember I rented Sonic 2.
There was only 4 games. That's why too.
It kind of feels that way sometimes. I had Sonic. I had a helicopter game called, I think, Blue Thunder or Thunder Blue. That was like an old arcade game that they put on the Sega Genesis. That was really fun. And I had the Jurassic Park game for the Sega Genesis, which was, I remember being fun, where you had to play as Alan Grant or Velociraptor. So you had the choice there. And also, which was a huge deal, I remember at the time, Sports Talk Baseball, where you actually had an announcer call the game. But it was one of those computer robotic announcer voices where it was like, up to bat number 41. Hits it to first. He is out. But at the time, it was a big deal because I didn't even think that would be possible to have play-by-play in a video game version of baseball. So those were the 4 Sega games I had, and they kept me entertained for a long time. But now, I don't know if I could do this, this might be considered cheating, but my pick for my favorite game of the Super NES era is one I actually didn't play until it was re-released on the PlayStation, but it was on the Super Nintendo. It wasn't remastered or anything. They added some cutscenes, but they just put it on the PlayStation in a collection with the same Super Nintendo graphics and gameplay style. So I'm going to count it because it is my favorite game of that era, and that is Chrono Trigger, the RPG from Squaresoft. And for a system that was known for great RPGs like Final Fantasy IV and VI, being considered some of the best of the series, being on the Super Nintendo, so it's a wide competition and playing field for RPGs on the Super Nintendo, I think. But I think Chrono Trigger stands above them all. It was really, I think, ahead of its time. The way that the story played out, where things you did, it's a time travel story, and certain things that happen or you do can affect the endings you can get in the game, which I believe there was 13 total different endings. Your main character could die and never come back, and you could beat the game without your main character, or you could do it where he does come back, which is part of the main canon story, but you can have a version where he never comes back and you beat the game. And just the way it created these memorable characters, it's great music. It was kind of like the dream team of developers, because you had Hironobu Sakaguchi from Final Fantasy being involved with it. You had Akira Toriyama, the creator of Dragon Ball, as the character designer. And the music, Matsuda, who I was going to say he didn't necessarily work hand in hand with Nobuo Uematsu on the music in this game, because it is definitely Matsuda's score. But I think Nobuo Uematsu had a little bit of helping hand with it, if I remember correctly. But the score on it is fantastic. It was like the complete package for an RPG game. Story, graphics, gameplay, characters, soundtrack. Everything about it blew me away from not even playing it when it originally first came out. But I just loved it so much. I experienced every ending in that game. I saw all 13, leveled all my characters up to the max, and just really appreciate it for what it was, for playing it years after it originally came out, and just knowing how it was, why it was considered such a standout for that era. So I'm going to go with Chrono Trigger as my favorite game from the Super NES/Genesis area, which is, for me, very hard to pick in that era because there's so many great ones. I didn't even talk about the licensed games, like the Super Star Wars games that came out during that time for the Super Nintendo. Fantastic. Turtles in Time, amazing. I mentioned Jurassic Park was another good one. The Batman Returns and Batman, the animated series game for the Super Nintendo. I played those to death. So that's why the Super Nintendo is my favorite console. It just covers everything. RPGs, fighting games like Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, platformers, adventure games like Zelda, Super Metroid, the fantastic Nintendo first-party franchises games were some of the best ever. Sports games were great on there. Everything. It had everything. That's what I love about it so much. But for me, Chrono Trigger stands above the rest. So if you're ever looking for a good RPG game to play, an old school one, Dane, definitely check out Chrono Trigger.
I think I have played it on the original PlayStation.
Okay, yeah, because that's where I first played it. Final Fantasy. It was called Final Fantasy Chronicles, where it had Final Fantasy IV and Chrono Trigger.
Yeah. because as we'll get to when we talk about the next generation, I played a ton of RPGs on the PlayStation. Didn't finish a lot of them. I'll be honest with you. But yeah.
All right, so let's get into the next generation, which is another great one. The N64, PlayStation, and I'm even going to throw in Dreamcast era here, but I don't think any of those games are going to make it on.
Yeah, again, the 4 games that was on that were on Dreamcast.
Poor Sega. I feel bad for it sometimes. And the console wars that it lost every single time.
At least they tried, I guess.
But this is another. See, it's not necessarily tough because I knew what was my pick here no matter what. But at the same time, I can understand it being hard for someone to choose because this was another great era of games. I kind of look at the PlayStation the same way I look at the Super Nintendo, where it really covered a wide variety of genres of games, of really great ones that you can choose from like RPGs, platformers, shooters, and all those type of different ones that you can choose from. PlayStation had a great variety of games. And the 64, not so much a great variety as the PlayStation. 64 is, I think, mainly remembered for just amazing first-party games from Nintendo. Just a lot of great stuff came out for the N64. And going straight to it, this was pretty much only going to be a two-way battle for me between Final Fantasy VII and Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. But anyone who knows me or listened to this podcast and some of our other video game discussions, it's not going to be a surprise for me to say that Ocarina of Time is my favorite game from this generation because it is my favorite game of all time. It precedes generations. Yes. It's just, I never had an experience like playing The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time where a game just moved me the way it did from on all levels. Story, gameplay, music, the interactivity with it, the way you just felt immersed in the game with the environment and just little things like playing the ocarina, learning songs, just everything about it was the complete package. And obviously I love Zelda already, but seeing it like this with 3D graphics and the combat with the revolutionary Z targeting system on there, it was just a gaming experience like never before and one that I'll never forget. And just, there are games obviously that look better now, improved gameplay mechanics, but that experience of playing that for the first time, I don't think it's ever going to be surpassed for me. And it is probably the game I've replayed the most. That's not a sport or a fighting game, but just thinking about completing an adventure game several times. I can't imagine count how many times I've replayed it and collected everything. That's just how much I loved it. I just wanted to keep going back and experience it. So as much as I love Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy VII is my second favorite game of all time, and Chrono Trigger is my third favorite. So those 3 games are all in these 2 generations of video games or console generations that we have here, the Super Nintendo and then this era with the N64 and PlayStation. But yeah, it's got to be Ocarina of Time for me. If I have it as my favorite game of all time, there's no way I can't pick it for my favorite of this generation, even though it had some great competition with Final Fantasy VII and some other great games that came out during this era.
See, this one is a tough one for me. I mean, beyond Ocarina of Time, it's not going to be that because like I said, I don't really like that whole light fairy elf thing. So
it's part of the charm, though.
which is the reason why I really liked Final Fantasy VII. You know, it's a hard sci-fi story, sci-fi fantasy story, and people die terribly in it.
Yep, that is true.
So yeah, Final Fantasy VII. If I can't pick Final Fantasy VII, you know, it's really hard because, you know, I really love the original Silent Hill. I liked Resident Evil 2 and 3. I liked Metal Gear Solid 1.
I was thinking about all these great franchises that I got to start on the PlayStation. What was the ones you're just naming right here?
Yeah. I think they all came out the same year, too. Metal Gear, Final Fantasy VII, Ocarina of Time.
Yeah, at least pretty close.
I think StarCraft 2, StarCraft, the original StarCraft, came out in the same year. So yeah, it's hard for me to pick. There's a bunch of just random RPGs that I played. Lunar. I
Lunar's
think I
great,
pl-
yeah.
I think I played Chrono Trigger. Legend of Dragoon.
That's an
Those are
underrated
fun.
game.
Yeah.
I really
Um,
like that RPG.
never got past the second disc because I couldn't play the second disc because it got all scratched.
Oh
Um,
no.
yeah. Legend of Dragoon, Parasite Eve, another Square game. Um, yeah, I guess I'm gonna have to pick Final Fantasy VII because I remember that was the first game where it was like, okay, I need to pay attention to the story because there's an actual story behind it. Um, it's not like, GoldenEye where you just go around with your friends and you try to kill,
Mm,
your friends or whatever. Um, so yeah, I'm probably gonna pick Final Fantasy VII. Yeah.
cool. Well, I'm glad one of us has Zelda, the other has Final Fantasy VII. But
Yeah.
another thing too, just want to mention, you're mentioning GoldenEye, how this console generation, especially the 64, was the golden age of playing with your friends and like couch co-op, or not couch co-op, but just couch multiplayer
Yeah.
with the 64. GoldenEye obviously was a big one. Then Mario Kart 64 had played that so many times with a friend who would pretty much come over almost every day and play that. And then when Smash Brothers, the first one, came out, that just took multiplayer gaming to another level with friends. And so 64 was known for having some great party games that and multiplayer games that you could spend hours and hours playing. And I definitely did with some of those games I just mentioned there. So
Yeah.
what was great about the 64.
And an honorable mention. I'm not sure if it's is GameCube part of
No, that's the
this
next one.
generation? Yeah, it's the next one. Okay, never mind.
All right. Well, if you want, you can mention it right now because we are on the PS2, Xbox, and GameCube era.
GameCube. Uh, I kind of miss it. I kind of miss the GameCube.
It was a
Um,
fun, quirky system.
yeah,
Definitely in its look, but hey, that's and the disc that it used, but it had some good games. That's for darn sure.
not a lot of games, but that's some good games. Eternal Darkness. I know a lot of people haven't really played it.
Hmm.
That's one of the best horror games that I've ever played. Makes you it's one of the first games where I thought I broke the game, I broke the
Uh,
system. It did one of those things that I don't know if it's become standard, but it sort of tricks you into thinking that you broke your system
yeah.
because it gives you the blue screen of death actually, but it yeah, it makes you think that you broke your system, the game is broken, and it sends you back to the starting screen. Um, but yeah, just a honorable mention is Eternal Darkness.
And one you wouldn't expect to be on a Nintendo exclusive
I
when
know.
you got the Xbox and the PlayStation 2 out there. So, do you have your favorite from that generation, or are you still mulling it over?
I still have to think about it.
All
Yeah,
right.
I'll think about it. Yeah.
I'll go ahead and go with mine then. And this one, again, I was probably not as great as the last generation with the PlayStation 64, but you got a new competitor in here with Microsoft and Xbox, and they really came out of the gate swinging with a, a game that became a classic and would be considered the definitive one for this generation with Halo, obviously. And so that's not going to be my pick, but this was, at least for what I can remember, the first time where there was really a three-headed race for in the console wars for three companies because 64 with PlayStation, Dreamcast came at the end, wasn't really a factor. Obviously, Super NES and Genesis, there was no Sony yet, but this was the first time with there was three in competition with each other, and both kind of had to come out with some really good exclusives. This is where getting exclusive was such a big deal back then from other third parties. I remember this is the time where Nintendo made an exclusive deal with Capcom that got 5 exclusive games. So everyone was fighting for their exclusives from third parties and trying to create some great first party games. But this is the era dominated by the PS2. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. We were talking about earlier the reasons why so many people got it with a DVD player, not to mention backwards compatibility with its older games. And just the games in itself, there are just so many great ones. And this was really the console generation where the graphics just made such a substantial leap from the previous one. When you look back on the original PlayStation to the PlayStation 2, I mean, it's night and day. And yeah, you can kind of say that with the 3D models from the Super Nintendo being just 2D and 16-bit graphics to the N64, 64 bits, and the PlayStation 32 bits. But they were still kind of rough in certain areas, especially some of those old PlayStation games that were really pixelated. But the PS2 and the Xbox and GameCube graphics, there was just such a big jump in quality when it comes to the graphics on there. And the PS2 was the first. And a lot of great games came out on there. I remember 2001 being a big year for games for the PlayStation 2. Like, introduced some great platformers, at least for me, like the Jak and Daxter game. And later on that, in 2002, you had Ratchet and Clank, which I'm a big fan of that series. That got its start in the PS2. But also in that 2001 year, you had Grand Theft Auto 3, which is a revolutionary game at the time, which I'm sure would some consider to be the staple for this generation and what it did. But tons of other great games came out that year. I remember I didn't mention this on the last one, but the Tony Hawk Pro Skater franchise, I loved that series on the original PlayStation. But in 2001, it came out for Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3, which still is my favorite Tony Hawk game. I played that game to death. The way you could create your character, you get customize your moves. Darth Maul was a secret playable character, and you can create your own character, but take other characters' moves. So Darth Maul had a move where he would use the Force to do some tricks with a skateboard. So I would do that move for my own character, so it looked like I'd have the Force while I was skateboarding. Tons of fun with Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. Final Fantasy X, we talked about that a lot on this podcast. This is how great it was, and a big deal as far as, again, a Final Fantasy game that looked that good in the first half. Voice acting. So PlayStation 2 had a lot of great stuff, and the Xbox, like I mentioned, was Halo. GameCube continued Nintendo's streak of having great first-party games. Not their best in the series. Like Mario Sunshine is not my favorite Mario game. Legend of Zelda Wind Waker is fantastic. Such a departure. I remember it was a controversy when that got revealed, but it ended up being a great game, but not my favorite Zelda game. Metroid Prime was great, though, for the GameCube. That took Metroid in a whole totally different direction, but it was a great series. And then Smash Brothers Melee is probably still my favorite Smash Brothers game, although the new one on the Switch, Smash Brothers Ultimate, is pretty close when you consider all the content it has. But there's just something special, I think, about Melee. The big graphical leap, the orchestrated soundtrack, the character roster at the time was so huge. I remember, and the character levels that you would play on there, which is really cool. So a lot of great stuff in this generation. But my favorite game from the PS2 era is going to be the very first Kingdom Hearts. Kingdom Hearts, obviously, I'm a big fan of that franchise. I followed pretty much every game, as convoluted as the story gets and ridiculous as it can get. I've stuck with it and I've come to appreciate it in its own quirkiness, but I've always loved the way it merged the Squaresoft character, or Square Enix now at the time, their characters mixed in with the Disney franchise. Some you didn't think on paper would work at all, but yet it works so well. And that first Kingdom Hearts game was proof of that. It's probably still my favorite of the series, just because it was special, getting that to play it for the first time and seeing Final Fantasy characters mixed in with new characters created from the game while you're playing in classic Disney movie world locations. It's all blended so nicely, and the combat for it, I loved immediately. Even some recent Final Fantasy games, I think, take their cue from it, like 15 and even a little bit of Final Fantasy VII Remake. I think a lot of it stems from what they did with Kingdom Hearts and the combat there. And yeah, I just continue to love that game. I played it on multiple remakes. I just got it, not remakes, but remasters. I just got it again on the Xbox One. I'm looking forward to replaying it again in 4K this time. So this franchise, I just love it so much, and how it blends all these great franchises together and creating its own lore at the same time, even though it can be confusing. But it was definitely much simpler with this first Kingdom Hearts game. But I just remember being blown away going to these, at the time, with great graphics, the locations of these Disney world mixed in with Final Fantasy and Square Enix elements. So yeah, Kingdom Hearts blew me away back then for that generation, and I still look at it fondly as my favorite game of that era, amongst a bunch of other great games that came out with 3 consoles during this era. But I'm gonna have to give it for Kingdom Hearts.
That was one of the games that I remember buying the game and the strategy guide.
Yeah, the same. I still got the guide too.
For me, I guess I have to say Metal Gear Solid 2.
That is a
I
good one. Yeah.
Yeah, I played that game endlessly, beat it, and you can still play it after. Um, yeah, I just love that game.
And that was such a big deal when that came out, and just the
Yeah,
demo for it. I remember this is a good game in its own right. Zone of the Enders, which is like a mech suit game by Kojima. It was really fun. I liked it a lot, but most people got it just because it came with the demo for Metal Gear Solid 2. But it was Metal Gear Solid 2 was such a huge deal. I remember, and I think for the most part, it lived up to the hype. But I remember it did as far as gameplay wise, but I remember the controversy of only be able to play as
Raiden.
Raiden for the majority of the game, which didn't sit too well on some Metal Gear fans.
Yeah. Well, you play as him for the majority of the game, and um, I had no problem with him. Um, sure, that skin tight suit is questionable. I still don't know why he wore that, but
Even
um,
play him naked at one point in the game.
yeah, yeah, I have no problem with it. Also, I remember this is so like you sound stupid now, but it was mind blowing back then. Third person camera to
Mm.
first person camera,
Oh yeah.
and yeah, and you could aim the gun. I
uh,
remember that it was like, oh my god, what are they doing? But yeah, Metal Gear Solid 2 for me.
nice choice. Even though
Yeah,
Snake Eater is a great game too, but it didn't quite have
yeah,
like the hype
yeah,
level that Metal Gear 2 had.
yeah.
All right, so that takes us into the next era, which is PS3, Xbox 360, and the Wii. And this is where games gone into the HD era and full blown online play.
Except for the Wii.
Yeah, that is very true and definitely noticeable.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
I was mainly an Xbox 360 guy. I had a PS3, got that a year later after the 360 came out. But it was kind of one of those things, and this has lasted till this day, honestly, where Xbox systems are my main consoles for third-party games, and PS3 and the PS4 later was ones where I just get and play the Sony exclusives that are on there. And this kind of started in this era because each of them had some great exclusives. I mean, the Halo franchise took off on the 360 with some great games. Obviously, Halo 3 was a big deal, but Halo Reach was the big one for me. I just love that game. It's probably my favorite of the Halo franchise. But then also it came out with Gears of War, which is obviously really big for Microsoft and starting another franchise for them for this console generation. And then the PlayStation had some great ones on this era too. I think none bigger than Uncharted, the franchise they created with that, and just how it's become. It feels like it's been around longer than it is, but Uncharted started with I think it came out in 2007 on the PS3. But when you think about it, 2007 is kind of a long time ago. It doesn't feel that way though. But Uncharted has become such a staple in video game franchises now. It seems like it's been there even longer than that. But there is one franchise that stood out above the rest this console generation, and I want to say the entire trilogy because I love it that much. But if I have to pick just one, it's going to be from Mass Effect, and that is going to be Mass Effect 2. Mass Effect, the first one, blew me away with its storytelling and the decision you get to make as a character and the graphics at the time. Just BioWare, I think, really knocked it out of the park with the graphic designs, the character animations, the world, that just everything about it was just so lifelike and nothing I've seen before in a video game. And it really blew me away. But then you throw in, like I said, the choices you get to make in the story and this whole world that it created in this universe. I've said it before, but I think the character designs and creature designs and aliens are some of the best in sci-fi, probably second only to Star Wars, in my opinion. I just love the character designs it created for these different alien species. This is the first video game franchise where I got into some of the supplementary material, like the expanded novels that came out to expand the lore of the game, and I read those, some of the comics that came out for it. I just really got invested in the Mass Effect universe, and it started with that first one, but Mass Effect 2 took it to another level with the character interactions, the missions that you get to go on, the stories was even better than the first one, and just the final level or world, whatever you want to call it, just the final action beat of the game was something that I'll always remember. The suicide run that you have to do that in that game, it was just so much fun, and the choices you had to make and make sure you do certain things with the characters to keep them alive. That's what I loved about it, how each decision you make would affect not only that game but the other games to come. If you lost a character in the first one, they wouldn't be there in the second one, and stuff like that. Decisions you make would carry on beyond just the game you're playing into the sequel as well. So the third one obviously was controversial with the ending. I actually didn't mind it that much. The gameplay was as fun as ever, and that update they made a few months after, I felt fixed some of the issues that some fans had with it, that made it more of a complete ending for it. So overall, I love the trilogy, but I think its high point was Mass Effect 2 for just delivering some on every aspect that you loved about the first game, even more so with more great characters. The gameplay was more fun in that one than the first one. The menu RPG elements were handled a lot better than that first game. The menus weren't as clunky and messy. So Mass Effect 2 was the highlight of that console generation era of games for me, but I would really say the whole trilogy. I just love Mass Effect that much.
You see, this is where it gets really hard for me because there's so many games. Towards the end of the PlayStation 3 life cycle, there was a lot of great games. In the beginning, there was a lot of great games. In the middle, there was a lot of great games. But you were talking about exclusive titles, right? For Xbox and PlayStation. I guess I guess if you're a real big Nintendo fan, you bought a Wii. Well, I do have to say that this is the first console generation where I was like, oh no, I bought the wrong console. Because I bought Xbox 360 first.
And so you got the right console.
No, because it died.
Oh, the 3 red rings of death, that's right.
So yeah, I bought a Xbox 360 first, and then I saw the PlayStation 3, and I was like, oh, I should have bought a PlayStation 3. And then I did buy a PlayStation 3, and then this is where it gets hard because there's The Last of Us towards the end of the PlayStation 3's life cycle. There's BioShock Infinite, again, towards the end of the life cycle of both Xbox and PlayStation. Also there was Heavy Rain. I don't know if you played that game.
Oh, I forgot about that game. Now that you mention it, but I remember that one being talked about a lot.
The sort of detective based.
Yeah.
You got to find the clues to find the serial killer. That was another good one.
It was also the console generation of music-based games, Guitar Hero and Rock Band.
I forgot about that.
I played a lot of Rock Band with my brother.
Is there a drum one too?
Yeah, that's Rock Band.
Yeah. But I guess the one that impressed me the most initially, just right off the bat when I bought my Xbox and then when I bought my PlayStation, was the original BioShock. Because I don't know if you remember, but this is the era where Call of Duty became this big thing, right?
That's right.
And it was just like a first-person shooter. You play through it, you play through the story, then you play it online, and you play with your friends online, right? And it wasn't so much of Final Fantasy VII, right, where you had this expansive story around the combat mechanics, right? This big, huge story. And I think BioShock, the first BioShock, is the first game that I think that I've played that melded those two components correctly, or that did it first, right, for me. It's a great story. It's not as expansive. It's not as big as, Final Fantasy, because you're in a underwater habitat. So you can't
Yeah.
really have that huge world spanning story, right? So it's it's kind of like what they did with Final Fantasy VII, but it's on a smaller scale. Each section of the underwater habitat has its own theme, its own story, and it's just there's philosophy behind it. There's a great story behind it, and it's one of those games where you show up and something clearly went wrong, very, very wrong, and you have to
Yeah.
find out what went wrong. And you find out the story, and what happens when certain things go unchecked, and you find weird human experiments, weird art. I don't know what you call them, art shows or art portraits and stuff, and weird medicine and stuff like that. Yeah, so for me, it's like the first game that took what made Call of Duty so fun, which is, the first person, I'm gonna, I have to find the bad guy and shoot the bad guy sort of thing. And you pair it with a great story like Final Fantasy VII does or Ocarina of Time does. And I'm not saying that the story of Bioshock is comparable to those two, but it's that expansion of story that sort of we're going to focus on the story, and this Call of Duty thing is an afterthought,
Hmm.
sort of, right? Yeah, like I said, it's the game that sort of combined the two perfectly for me, and yeah, that's why I'm gonna have to pick Bioshock, the first Bioshock for my favorite game of this generation. Even though I really liked The Last of Us, I think The
I was just gonna
Last of
say
Us
that's
is
what I was expecting you to pick. I thought it was for sure gonna be The Last of Us for you.
yeah. Well, you see, the reason why I picked Bioshock is because Bioshock was the first that
Mm,
really, and The Last of Us sort of expanded on that and made it a bigger story, made it a bigger thing. Kind of like Final Fantasy VII, where you're going across the entire United States to find the cure. So yeah, I'm gonna have to pick Bioshock.
yeah. Yeah, it's like this is a good generation for a lot of like the expansive immersiveness with game and the storytelling really
Yeah,
took to another level on this generation. Like I said with Mass Effect, and you were talking about Bioshock and The Last of Us and
it
Uncharted, all these games.
yeah, it sort of became more cinematic.
Yeah,
You know,
totally.
um,
But I also cannot let this console generation go by without at least mentioning something that we never thought would happen, where we got a truly amazing Batman game with Arkham Asylum in this console
I
generation.
forgot about that. I forgot
Is
about.
You could easily put that up there as the best in this generation. It was really so good and just so surprising. And we talked about it on, I think we did an anniversary episode for it last year, but just how it was so unexpected to be that good when we're so used to Metacore Batman games and sometimes good one, but to actually have an amazing Batman game that's not just considered a good game for being a Batman game, but just a great Batman game in general. So, and it started on this generation. So that definitely would be up there in the top 3 or top 5 games of this generation easily. But that's going to move us to our final one, our current console generation, which is its PS4, Xbox One, and the Nintendo Switch. And sadly, I'm going to say this is the generation where I haven't played as much games as I used to. I've probably missed out on a lot of good and classic ones, but time and money now is kind of more pick and choose for the ones that I know I'm going to love. Like talking to the Switch, for example, Breath of the Wild, Super Mario Odyssey. Those are two great, fantastic Zelda and Mario games that probably are some of the best in the franchise. And I just had a blast playing on those generations, or playing it on the Switch for this generation, and I knew they were going to be great. So those ones, fantastic. And then with the Xbox One and the PS4, um, those were ones where I'm sure I kind of feel I'm left out on certain big franchises, probably that a lot of people have been playing. And this is where like the old man gamer is going to come out of me, because I think this console generation is going to be known for like the Fortnite era and those battle royale type shooters that I just never got into or don't have a desire really to get into. But this console generation has seen some great games of the ones that obviously franchises that we know about, some new ones. But the one I'm going to choose, because I could go with Final Fantasy 15 as one that I know I loved. A lot of people didn't seem to have that same opinion, but I thought it was a great next step forward for that franchise. And Kingdom Hearts 3 came out in this generation, which I love. But for this one, and if you would have asked me the first probably week that I was playing it, I would think you're crazy if it'd be my favorite for this generation. But it ended up being Red Dead Redemption 2. And I love the first Red Dead that came out last generation, which I think would be in that top 5 also. And for Red Dead Redemption 2, boy, did it just blow me away and take things to another level as far as immersive storytelling with characters you just really, really love. And I remember us talking about it on when we first started playing it on the podcast, where I wasn't getting into it as much as I was hoping I would. It started off a little slow. I thought there was too many
extremely slow
things you had to micromanage and a little too realistic. But once you got used to that and moved past that a little bit, it just became this open world of awesomeness, especially if you like the Old West time period. But like I said, the heart of it is just the characters. Arthur Morgan, your main character, being with the Dutch gang and just getting really close to the characters in that game, even though they're not playable. They go with you on missions. You have good conversations with them, and the way how you're always on the move and running throughout the land. And the graphics are just beautiful. Some of the best graphics you're going to see in this generation. And the story was fantastic too. Just like I said, seeing, because they're pretty much, you're spending with a family. They're different characters who aren't related, but the gang they're in, they've become a family. And over the course of the story, you really start to get attached to those characters. And as things start falling apart, it really hits you as far as what happens later on to certain characters. But then also how it just nicely goes in with the epilogue portion of the game, how it transitions, because this is a prequel to the first Red Dead, but how it transitions into stuff you're familiar with from the first Red Dead. I don't want to give up spoilers about it just because I think it's that good to experience it as you're playing. It just blew me away on all accounts after I got past that initial slowness. But the combat was really fun too, with the shootouts, the horse riding. Just everything about it was, I think, the pinnacle of this console generation so far, what games could be on taking that immersiveness to a whole nother level with storytelling. I think Red Dead 2 really accomplished that. Though, as I said at the start, it might have some competition when it's all said and done after I beat Final Fantasy VII Remake, because as we said at the beginning, we're loving that to no end. So I don't want to form a definitive opinion on that yet until I actually beat it. But for right now, I'm going to give it to Red Dead Redemption 2. And I didn't even throw in the multiplayer aspect of Red Dead Redemption 2, because that's like a whole nother game in itself. And I only played like maybe an hour of it, but I definitely want to go back and at some point really dive into the multiplayer, because it is like another story. You create your own character. It starts off with a story cutscene, and I just know the world is just as expansive as a single player. So that's just another added layer to it, which makes it so cool. Because I love the multiplayer in the first one, and I think it's even better in this one. I just haven't had a chance to spend as much time as I would doing it, but I would like to eventually. So yeah, Red Dead Redemption 2 is probably going to be my favorite for this console generation. I remember that story stuck with me a few days after I beat it. And the same thing happened with the first Red Dead. So for them to do it twice in a row, and it was kind of for different effects too, which I loved about it. So yeah, it's almost a perfect game if it didn't start off as slowly as it did. But I think looking back on it, if I was to experience again, it probably wouldn't bother me as much. To experience the story from beginning to end would be another great experience, I would think, now that I know what to expect. So yeah, Red Dead Redemption 2, I think, is the highlight of this console generation for me, pending me beating Final Fantasy VII Remake.
Have you played the online multiplayer?
I just barely scratched the surface of it. I probably shouldn't even say yes. I pretty much created my character, saw the opening cutscene, did a mission or two, and that's it. Because I want to do a co-op. There's a lot of co-op stuff. I want to play it with some friends, but
yeah.
Just haven't had the opportunity to.
So it beats out Spider-Man, Tim?
It does beat out Spider-Man. That was another highlight, though, of this console generation. That was really good. I mean, you could put it in the same vein as the Arkham games, but there's something about Red Dead and that story and the characters that just really stood out to me above the rest. Heck, it was so good, I even went on a Western film binge for a little bit during that period. And I don't really watch too many Westerns, but that just shows how much I just got engrossed in that world of that type of story.
Yeah, you see, for this one, this generation started off slow for me because I don't know if you remember, but I bought the PlayStation 4 when it came out.
Mm-hmm.
And there was no backwards compatibility to it, so there was only like 2 games that you could play. I can't remember which ones they were though. Yeah, but anyway, it's really hard for me to choose because each of the games that I have played I've really loved, except for a select few. Dragon Ball Z.
I had to throw that in there, huh? I thought you were going to mention the biggest one, or the biggest misstep in this generation, I think, would be
Death Stranding.
That's another one. But why I think it's the BioWare game. Oh, Anthem. That's the other.
Anthem. Yeah, that was a big waste of time and money. Death Stranding. It's a beautiful. It's so beautiful, that game. It's just you're kind of just doing nothing except walking around in it.
Delivering stuff, right?
Yeah, delivering packages, and it's like, but anyway, yeah. So it started off slow for me. I didn't really play a game that was like, oh my god, this is the game of the console generation, or whatever you want to call it. But I am going to have to say, despite Red Dead Redemption 2, Spider-Man, what else, Tim?
I don't know. Like I said, this is the era that I didn't play a lot of the ones that are considered, I think, some of the best games of this generation. But
for me, it's gonna have to be, or the one that blew my mind the most. Again, kind of going off the BioShock sort of theme here, is Wolfenstein: The New Order.
Yeah, I didn't play that one.
Yeah,
I know you raved about it.
Yeah, I didn't. I assume you haven't, but yeah, that one for me. Again, they take such a simple concept, just kill Nazis. That's all you got to do, and they build this story around it. Okay, so the Nazis won World War II. They've taken over all of Europe and Russia, and you find out in the second game, the United States, and you have to, win. You have to beat them somehow with your resistance movement. But what's really stuck, I mean, it's such a brutal game. The way you kill these Nazis, it's like so brutal. You cut off their legs, and then you slam your axe into their head as they're falling. It's such a brutal game. But then there are these passages where it's like, it's BJ, the main character. He's like reading poetry. It sounds like, almost, and it's honestly kind of beautiful how they contrast the two. Like this brutal violence, and then in the cutscenes, he BJ's talking in these sort of like little sort of runoffs of like poetry, and it's like it's kind of beautiful. And the story is also really good. How you have to like counteract the Nazis. You have to break this scientist out of a concentration camp, and then you gotta get the technology. Like, they're using this old Jewish technology to conquer new lands and stuff. And I just fell in love with the story. I just it's so well presented and so well done. and again, it's like the Call of Duty thing, where it's just like you can have that Call of Duty thing, right, where you just go around shooting stuff, but you can build a story around it, and so it's pretty much the same thing that I was talking about when I was talking about BioShock in the last generation. I they just did a really good job, and they did an even better job with the sequel, the New Colossus. So yeah, that's why the New Order, it was the first game where I was like, oh, okay, this console is good. I didn't waste my money.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting to pick Wolfenstein, but I know he's talking about how good it was. I'll have to check it out eventually. I just signed up for that Xbox Game Pass, where they kind of have
Yeah.
a list of games that you can play, and I got it for $1. It's going to last me for like the whole year, which is a great deal because of being an Xbox Live Gold member. So I'm wondering, hopefully it'll be on there. Maybe I could check it out once it's on there. But
Yeah.
you're making me want to check it out.
Yeah, it's really good. But both games, the New Order and the New Colossus, especially the New Colossus when you're in America, which is really really weird to see. Let me just say.
Okay. Yeah, some other games that to give a little shout out for this generation that I really love were another one, Ori and the Blind Forest, which they just came out with the sequel, Ori, the Will and the Wisp, which I'm gonna play after Final Fantasy Remake. It's an indie game, which the graphics on it are so good. I talked about it on some of our E3 shows, how it's the perfect visual for a fantasy type game. It's a adventure game in the similar vein to like Metroid and Castlevania, but it just looks so beautiful. I can't wait to play it. And also Cuphead was another one. I love that game. Just the art style, like an old 1930s cartoon, and it's a throwback to kind of old school shooters, platformers. It's so much fun just to look at even. That was great. And Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, that was, I don't want to say a nice surprise, but it was great to get a new Star Wars story-driven single-player game and that we haven't gotten in a long time. And for it to be as good as Fallen Order was like, again, don't want to say a nice surprise, but a welcome addition for a Star Wars experience we haven't had in a long time for video games.
Tim, if you have a newer Xbox One or a PlayStation 4.
Yes, not
that's all I'll say.
Xbox One. Yes. And also Star Wars Battlefront 2. I mean, despite its horrible launch, where it's at now, it's just a great Star Wars gaming experience that you could have for a shooter. The graphics continue to be amazing. The content that's on there, there's a heck of a lot to do on there to choose from. So despite its rough launch, it's become a full-blown game that I think every Star Wars fan should check out. And it's pretty cheap now. So if you didn't get it because of all the kind of bad publicity reviews it got for the horrible launch and its microtransactions and all that type of stuff, definitely give it another shot now. It's just a really good Star Wars experience for playing on battlefields and locations that look absolutely gorgeous that you're familiar with from all the movies. So I wanted to give that a shout out too.
Is Endor on there?
Of course. You can't have it without Endor.
Or, excuse me, the forest moon of Endor, Tim.
Yes. We got to see another moon of Endor, the Skywalker, which is nice.
One game that I would recommend is sort of an indie game. I played this developer's first game on PC. It's just a basic PC game. You don't need like a good computer or a good graphics card. It's just you're literally looking at pieces of paper. So it's called Papers, Please, and you pretty much play a border agent that has to like look through people's immigration papers and stuff. But the game
sound exciting, but I'll take your word for it.
It gets interesting after a while. But the game I wanted to talk about was, or mention, just as a quick honorable mention, is the game that followed that, which is called Return of the Obra Dinn. It takes place in like the 1800s, and it's your typical the ship, the Obra Dinn, goes out, and it's found without anybody on board, sort of like the Mary Celeste, right?
Okay.
And so it's towed back to England, and you're This is weird. It's like an immigration officer, and now you are a insurance investigator in this game. And you go on board and you try to figure out what happened. And you have this cool clock thing, this supernatural clock thing that makes you go back in time if you find like a clue or a body or a skeleton or something.
Okay.
You go back in time, and then you got to piece together in a still image what went down. You got to piece that piece of the story into who the people are and how it connects into a bigger story. But yeah, that's my honorable mention.
Yeah, I haven't even heard of that, but like
Yeah.
it definitely sounds more interesting when you said this about being an immigration officer or insurance
Yeah.
broker or
like,
whatever. But
well, the reason why the immigration officer one was really cool is because so there's a war that happened in a neighboring country. It takes place in a fictional country, right? And the neighboring country is also fictional. So there's a war going on, and you have to let people into your country that are escaping the war in the country that's the border country. So you have to figure out, okay, so who's legitimate and who's a threat, you know?
Mhm.
So yeah,
Okay, I'll have to look it up. You said it's
so,
called Papers, Please?
yeah, Papers, Please. Yeah, it's really good. And also, of course, Return of the Obra Dinn is really, really good. Again, like you, I can't really I can't really devote so much time as I did during the PlayStation 3 era and the PlayStation 2 era. I can't really devote that much time into video games. So like short games like this is perfect for me.
Yeah, I find myself that being the case for me too, as far as not super short, but games that will take months to beat. That you want to play and move on to the next one. So I'm not so adverse to shorter games now that I used to be in the past. But as long as it feels right, where not the story has room to breathe and you didn't feel shortchanged on what you were playing for what you paid for it too. So there's still a nice balance, but I'm not so hardcore word out. I need every game to be 80 hours or it's not worth it. Or something to that effect.
Sure. Well, I guess now it has to be a battle royale thing.
That's the thing, yeah,
right?
which
Yeah.
I can't and probably will not get into. I'm sorry if that's your thing, but it's not for me.
Me neither, Tim.
It's, all right, so that's going to do it for this feature topic. Before we fully wrapped it up, it's got a few mentions on Twitter when I said we're going to be talking about this. And of course, we had to get some responses in about some of the classic Batman games from each console generation. And one response we got from Travis at Travis_156. He said the Batman NES game, which I totally agree. And as I always say, and I'll always say it when this game comes into conversation.
Tim, can I say it for you?
Go for it.
It has a really good soundtrack.
Yes, I was going to say this time the music alone would put it in the discussion for one of the great games of the console generation. That's how much I love it. So, obviously, you've heard me say it millions of times, Dane. So.
Of course.
And then Philip Barker at Unfiltered says Arkham City. Obviously, we mentioned Arkham in the beginning, but Arkham City, I think, is the one that is remembered as being the best of the trilogy, at least the trilogy developed by Rocksteady, because can't forget about Origins. But for me, it's always going to be Arkham Asylum, and just for kind of like I was talking about with Kingdom Hearts and how special it was experiencing that for the first time. That's the same way I kind of treat it for a Batman video game, that experiencing something on that level for Batman in the video game, I'll never forget, and will always be my favorite. So thank you guys for sharing in some of your picks for the Batman games for each generation. Batman, I think he does have a game for each generation. Obviously, some are not great, but if you think about it, obviously the NES one, which is great. Super Nintendo, I mentioned the animated series one and the Batman Returns. And I don't think, maybe 64 PlayStation. Oh, you know what? They came out with the Gotham Street Racer game for the PlayStation, which was based on the animated series, but I don't think it was that great. And of course, the Batman and Robin movie tie-in game came out on the PlayStation. So, not the best era. Which one?
The Batman Beyond.
Oh, that's right.
PlayStation
Yeah.
game. Yeah.
So I actually got that one. See, I tried to block that out. See, Batman Beyond had that this era, and 64 had Superman for their horrible games for DC during this era. Not a good
Oh
one.
man, I forgot about that game. I should have said that was my favorite game
Yeah.
of the N64 era.
Especially when you paid $80 for everything on
Yeah.
that.
The Rumble Pack,
I
the
was the memory card in the
memory
game that
card.
you get. Yes. I'm never gonna let that down.
Nope.
But
Nope.
things looked up on the PS2, Xbox, GameCube era with Batman Vengeance, and I think an underrated game, Rise of Sensu, which is kind of a sequel to Vengeance, just because it's set in the animated series universe, and it's kind of a beat 'em up game that you could have couch co-op on there, which was fun.
Dark Tomorrow, wasn't that
That
another one?
that's the down, I think it's downturn for Batman video games that generation because that game is awful.
Yeah.
But the graphic, I remember being blown away by the graphics in that game when I was seeing images, and I was just crushed when it wasn't good. Like, again, we're never gonna get a good Batman game that looks this good.
Oh no, Superman 64 all over again.
Yep, almost.
Oh no, this game sucks.
Thankfully, that changed the next console generation was Arkham Asylum. So,
You know, that's one thing I'm thankful for in this day and age. We have reviews and the internet and people saying, you know, this game sucks. You know, because back then it would be like, okay, finally, you know, I saved up all of my allowance and I can finally get Superman 64.
yeah.
Finally, it's going to be awesome. I'm going to be flying around and fighting guys in the air. I'm going to, you know, save Lois. I'm going to do all this stuff. And then you get Superman 64. It's like, that's why I'm so thankful for this day and age where it's like,
That's true.
you know, okay, this game is good. Okay, maybe I should give it a try.
See, we had reviews back then for when Superman 64 came out, but it was at the time where I didn't know that if a review didn't come out before a game was released, that means it's probably going to be bad. And there was no review or hint, or I didn't even know the release date of Superman 64. I just remember seeing it at Toys R Us when I first started working there. Oh, the game finally came out. Yes, I've been waiting forever for it. And the rest is history. And not good history.
Not good history. So is that still the worst game you ever played?
Yeah, I think so. It has to be, considering what I spent on it. Yeah, it has to be that.
Yeah. I'm just trying to think what's the worst game I've played. You know what? I will mention it when I think of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hopefully by the time the episode's over.
Yeah.
Still got a few more things to talk about. But that'll do it for our feature topic. But it was fun going through memory lane of the history of video game consoles and their generations and all the different games that came out for those eras and just how much fun it was. And just how old we are now, dating back all the way to the NES days. But it was fun reliving those memories. But moving on to some news and discussion topics, nothing too big. One big thing that came out just, I believe it was just yesterday, that it was announced J.J. Abrams and his Bad Robot Company are going to be developing a Justice League Dark series for HBO Max. I believe J.J. and Bad Robot are doing 3 series for HBO Max. One is, I think, a sequel to The Shining or something set into that universe. But obviously the big one for us comic fans is that they're doing a Justice League Dark series. And part of me is like, cool, J.J. Abrams and Bad Robot are involved with developing a DC show. But at the same time, I'm not a huge fan of the Justice League Dark characters. So we'll see. I just think it's cool that J.J. and Bad Robot are going to be involved in the DC universe in a small way. And, well, I shouldn't say a small way, but in a way that, you know, we'll see if going to be connected to any of the other DC TV shows, but it's going to be connected to the Green Lantern show coming to HBO Max or not. But I like the idea of JJ working in the DC universe now after he's done with Star Wars. So that was some cool news to get, but also some disappointing news just came out today before we started recording, is that Comic-Con 2020 has officially been canceled due to everything that's going on with the coronavirus. And it's something that shouldn't come as a huge surprise, but still disappointing that we now know officially we're not going to be getting a Comic-Con this year. I thought I remember reading that they were contemplating maybe doing some type of online or streaming version of it, but in the press release announcing the cancellation, they didn't mention anything about that, just how they'll see everyone again in 2021, hopefully. So that's a bit of a bummer. It's going to be a quiet summer, that's for sure. Hardly no movies, no conventions, and concerts aren't happening. I had a 311 Incubus concert I got tickets for that in July that I don't think is going to happen now. They haven't officially said it's been canceled, but the way things are going, I don't see how they cannot cancel or postpone it. So disappointing, but just part of the times we have to deal with as we make it through this, and hopefully just hope for the stuff to return in the future as we make it through this rough period right now. But that was it for...
Yeah, you just reminded me of, like, I remember before all this went down, the big thing was, Rage Against the Machine is coming back.
Yeah,
they're going to do a reunion tour. And then I guess it's not happening anymore.
Not anytime soon, anyway.
Yeah, not anytime soon. So it's
yeah,
unfortunate.
I got like VIP tickets for this 311 Incubus show where I got a meet and greet. I got to get seats on the stage to hear it, which I'd never experienced for in a concert, which I was excited about. I've seen 311 15 times already. I figured this one wanted to do it different to get a different experience, seeing it from the stage. So a bit of a bummer, but I'm sure they'll make it happen again, hopefully next summer.
Or maybe they'll reschedule.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping for. But we can move on now to our review section, which is going to be another review of the second issue of Batman: The Adventures Continues that just came out this week. So before I get into it, gotta always give out the spoiler warning, as I'll be going into the details of the events that happened in this issue. And for the rating scale, trying to think of what would be a good one for this episode. Something video game related, obviously.
Video games that Dane and Tim have played that show that they are old. There you go.
That sounds good to me, because it's true. It's good and true. Yeah. All right. So Batman: The Adventures Continue issue 2 picks up where we left off, where Lex Luthor has Batman in a chokehold in his mech suit, as it was revealed that Lex was behind the theft of that container that contained some Kryptonian technology that he was after. And it gets revealed that it is Brainiac's head that Superman has held on to, and Lex wants it. And I like the dialogue between Bruce and Lex here. Even though Lex doesn't know he's Bruce Wayne here, they were kind of both showing, like, they're saying whose company is better. Batman was saying Wayne Tech's crew went through this and they found nothing, and there's nothing you can take from it. It's been wiped out. And Lex says, well, that's Wayne's crew isn't Lex's crew. Like, I'll be able to find something. No matter if something's been wiped out, I'll be able to find it. And I like how Batman in his monologue is saying, when I say Bruce Wayne's crew, I just mean me. And I know what's that machine is still capable of. And in order to get out of the chokehold that Lex had him in, Bruce threw a batarang to the disabled Brainiac head. But given the genius that he was able to still find some working mechanisms in there to hotwire some circuits that fired a laser beam right at Lex's mech suit and freeing Batman. So this is some more fun banter between Batman and Lex Luthor, trying to see who's the superior genius out of the two. So I like that kind of stuff. But then at the Batcave, as Alfred is patching Bruce back up, he realizes he's going to need a stronger suit to fight Lex in his mech suit. And we get a cool reveal where we get this kind of not rundown, but almost like a prototype early version of the Dark Knight Returns suit that Batman had when he fought Superman in that story. But we're getting the animated series version of it. And it looks pretty cool, but it's not quite up to par with it. It looks like some upgrades needed to be implemented to like the full blown on mech suit that we know and love from that story. But it did have a cool look to it, and that's where they were drawing inspiration from. It was kind of cool to see the animated series version of that. So as Bruce is getting ready to prep that suit, that giant robot he fought in the beginning of the first issue, Alfred makes a discovery as they're looking at the schematics for it, saying that there looks to be two cockpits in there for two pilots. Bruce goes, that's actually not a cockpit, that's a battery. And that gives him the realization of what's really going on here. So as Bruce makes his way in this cool mech suit with his jetpacks and all, trying to find the location of Lex, one of his men spills the beans on where Lex at in a plane. As they're flying Lex and Mercy Graves, Batman bursts in to the plane. He's pretty much Superman in the suit. He's flying. He has super strength. He just stops the plane. Lex Luthor flies out, and they just have a battle in the sky as Superman and Lex Luthor would, but instead it's Batman in this cool mech suit, which is cool to see. And then we get the reveal of this giant robot they've been fighting and why it's so powerful. Batman disables it with some green electricity coming out. And out of the robot cockpit that Alfred saw was a second cockpit seat, but Bruce realized was a battery charge, ends up being Superman. We knew Superman was missing and hasn't been seen for a while in the first issue, and Lex was playing it up that he doesn't know where he is, but in certain instances, he sure wishes Superman was here to take out giant beings like this robot. But it turns out Lex had him captured in this robot suit all along, which I thought was a kind of neat twist that I didn't suspect was coming, but it was cool to get that reveal. And then this Batman and Superman able to disable Lex in that giant robot suit, no problem. And what I love a lot about the DC animated universe is that banter, that friendship, that camaraderie that Superman and Batman have, and that the animated universe does so well. And again, it continues here with Alan Burnett and Paul Dini writing here. Just that conversation Bruce and Batman had at the end, and how Bruce realized, how he could free Superman, and Superman realizing, again, I owe you. And then just the way Batman treats and views Superman as a Boy Scout and the way he talks, and just fun stuff like that. I just always love reading whenever Batman and Superman are together in the animated series universe. Just totally different characters, but yet they have so much respect for each other. And then the issue ends giving us another tease of Jason Todd being in this universe, as he looks on the location to where I think he first met Batman, as he's saying, this is where it all began. And it kind of feels strange being here. It's like a creepy vibe, as he's saying to himself in his monologue. And we're seeing this location. There's some metal pieces kind of left on the street and on the sidewalk. I think giving you the hint, this is where he tried stealing the tires off the Batmobile. But some loud apartment dweller in the building came out yelling at Jason for loitering there. He's going to call the cops if he doesn't move. And then Jason pulls out a gun and just says, yeah, go ahead and try it. And we get the full look at Jason's character model here, because in the first issue, he was just kind of hanging out in the shadows. We didn't get a good look at his face, but now he gets the full-blown reveal of animated series version of Jason Todd. And I just can't wait to see what they're going to do with him in the story. I'm just fascinated to see how he fits in the timeline of everything that happened in the animated series. So this was just a two-part story featuring Lex Luthor and that giant robot. Next, we're going to get Deathstroke, which, again, another character making his debut in the animated series, and I can't wait to see what he's like in this universe. So another solid issue. I like kind of how self-contained and short these are, almost like episodes, really. These two issues can easily be one episode of Batman the Animated Series, and this was like a fun team-up one with Superman. So I'm going to give this one probably 3.5 out of 5 video games that Dane and Tim have played that make them old. So this series is off to a really solid start. And again, I think it's only going to get better and better as more gets revealed about Jason Todd and we get these new elements and wrinkles added into the DC animated universe. So I can't wait to find out more, but it's off to a really solid start. Really enjoyed these first 2 issues. But with that, that's going to do it for this episode. So as always, I'll go ahead and throw it to you, Dane, for the outro.
All right, just go to the BatmanUniverse.net, Facebook.com/The Batman Universe, Twitter handles at Batman Universe, show's Twitter handle is at Bat-Fans Podcast, Tim's Twitter handles at TimG311. I'll say it because your concert got canceled.
Thanks, Dave. That'll make it a lot better.
Yeah. And my Twitter handle is at DaneSaysBanana. Rate and reviews on iTunes. You can email the show at batfanswithoutpants@gmail.com. So with that, like we say at the end of every single episode, Tim, what's it going to be?
So before I say what we always say, Dane, did you think of the worst game that you've played yet?
Yeah, Anthem.
Oh, should have realized that earlier, right?
Yeah.
Which sucks that it's so recent too. But
yeah, Anthem. Yeah, that was terrible.
I believe it.
Yeah.
But like we say at the end of each and every episode, we love each and every one of you with all of our video games hearts, from NES generation up to the PS4, Xbox One, and the Switch generation. No matter how good or how bad the games are, with all of our hearts.
We'll see you guys next time.
Yeah.
We'll see you guys next time.
See you next time, everybody.
Sunrise under Gotham, crime faces of a boy scared